Let's turn our attention now to data breaches. The bad news is we are all going to suffer data breaches of some kind. Most of us will already have done so. The important thing is to spot them and to deal with them. The myth that's going around under GDPR is that every data breach has to be reported to the ICO within 72 hours of it happening. That's patently not correct. It simply isn't true. Under GDPR, you don't have to report every data breach, and the 72 hours only starts from when you become aware of the data breach. As an example, there will be people who produce scam emails. They usually drop a piece of software onto your server and then just leave it for 3 months to see if it gets noticed. If it doesn't, they then use your server to send out their scam emails. That 72 hours can't start until you're aware of the data breach. It can't start when it first happened because you weren't aware of it for the first 3 months. Secondly, we do not have to report every single breach. The breaches that have to be reported to the ICO are the ones that are likely to cause a significant detrimental effect to the individual whose data is concerned with, around things like discrimination, loss of confidentiality, potential financial loss, those sort of things. If there's no serious risk to them, then you don't have to report it. If there is a risk, then it has to be reported to the ICO, and you'll need to make sure that you give them as much information as possible. If it's a high-risk situation, perhaps financial data has been revealed by mistake, that sort of thing, then we also have to make sure that as well as notifying the ICO, we notify the individuals themselves so that they can take actions to protect themselves. So if we thought that the cashless catering software had released all of the information of their financial details, their card numbers, etc., we'd have to make sure that we notified the individuals so that they could take action with the bank to change passwords and protect themselves. What's important is to recognise a data breach and to make sure you deal with it, even the minor ones. You need to have a process in place. That should be a starting point of recording every data breach that comes along. Everything that you think is a potential data breach, record it and record how you dealt with it. A lot of the time you'll deal with it internally and you won't need to report it to the ICO. As an example, you could have a member of staff accessing, for example, safeguarding information on a student. They're authorised to do so. They're looking at it on their computer, but then they get called away for something and they fail to lock their computer down. Somebody else comes along who isn't authorised to see that data, but does. That's a data breach. How serious it is would depend on who saw the data and what the actions are likely to be that they're going to take. If it were another member of staff, for example, there's a good chance that they will stand there and protect the data and mention to the member of staff when they come back they should have closed their computer down so that others couldn't see it. Record that in your incident log. Record the fact that it was dealt with by words of advice to the member of staff to remind them to clear screen, always lock their screen when they go away from their desks. And that's a breach that's been dealt with. It doesn't need to be recorded. It doesn't need to be notified to the ICO. If, on the other hand, the person who saw the data was a visitor to the school, a contractor, for example, that sort of thing, then that might be something you would have to report to the ICO because we don't know what that person is going to do with the data that they've now received and they shouldn't have. So therefore, we would have to go to the ICO. Important thing is to have a process in place. Make sure that your staff know what to do if they do see something like a data breach, who in school they should tell about it so that they can investigate it and decide whether it needs to be reported. Make sure it's always recorded, and whether you report it or not to the ICO, you record how you dealt with it. And make sure that you put something in place to make sure it doesn't happen again. It's very important to go to the ICO if you're not sure. If you're not certain whether it should be reported or not, if it's serious enough to report, go to the ICO and ask them. They are really helpful. If you go to their website, there are email addresses, phone numbers. There's even a live chat system on there where you can get in touch with them, explain what's happened, and they'll tell you whether it's something that needs to be notified to them or not. And that's a perfect way of dealing with something if you're not sure.